Welcome, everyone, to Friday Night Young at Heart. This is session number 175, and I'm Father James DeLuzio with the Paulist Fathers back in our library, ready, willing, and able, by the grace of God, to offer you nursery rhymes, stories, songs, poems, Mother Goose, Aesop's fables, Lewis Carroll, limericks, larks, and such, and other things to keep us all young at heart. And since we're in that young at heart mode, I'm wearing my Halloween green. You never heard of Halloween green? Neither have I, but I just thought I'd say it because it rhymed. We're going to continue with part 2 and the final chapters of Hansel and Gretel. I didn't want to keep you waiting till next week. Plus, it's such a great Halloween story, really. It needs to come to its fulfillment. So we left the children in the woods a second time, abandoned by their parents. Now, I told you that I have a favorite version, so I'm going to insert a little of that. In the opera by Engelbert Humperdinck, when the children are asleep, angels come to protect them. And that's such a beautiful, beautiful moment in the opera, but it's not in the original story. And then I'll tell you at the end how he ends it, which is even nicer. Okay, all right, here we go. It was now the third morning after they left their father's house. They started walking again, but they just got deeper and deeper into the wood. If they didn't get help soon, they were sure to perish. At noon they saw a beautiful bird, white as snow, perched on a branch. It was singing so beautifully that they stopped to listen. When it had finished its song, it flapped its wings and flew on ahead of them. They followed it until they came to a little house. The bird perched on its roof, and as they approached the house, they realized that it was built of bread and had a roof made of cake and transparent windows of sugar. "Let's see what it tastes like," said Hansel. "May the Lord bless our meal. I'll try a piece of the roof, Gretel, and you can try the window. That's sure to taste sweet." Hansel reached up and broke off a small piece of the roof to see what it tasted like. Gretel went over to the window pane and nibbled on it. Suddenly, a gentle voice came from inside. "Nibble, nibble, is it a mouse? Who's that nibbling at my house?" The children replied, "The wind, so mild, the heavenly child." And they continued eating without getting it distracted. Hansel, who liked the taste of the roof, tore off a big piece of it, and Gretel knocked out an entire window pane and sat down on the ground to savor it. Suddenly, the door opened, and a woman as old as the hills, leaning on a crutch, hobbled out. Hansel and Gretel were so terrified that they dropped everything in their hands. The old woman said, with her head shaking, "Well, dear children, how in the world did you get here? Come right inside and stay with me. How in the world? You will not meet with any harm here." She took them by the hand and led them into her little house. They were served a wonderful meal of milk and pancakes with sugar, apples, and nuts. Later, 2 beautiful beds were made up with white sheets. Hansel and Gretel lay down in them and fell as if they were in heaven. The woman had only pretended to be so friendly. She was really a wicked witch who was waiting for the children. She had built the little house of bread just to lure them inside, and as soon as a child was in her power, she killed it, cooked it, and ate it. That was a real feast for her. Witches have red eyes and can't see very far, but they have a keen sense of smell like animals. And they can always tell when a human being is around. When Hansel and Gretel got near her, she laughed fiendishly and sneered. "They're mine. This time they won't get away from me." Early in the morning, before the children were awake, she got out of bed and looked at the two of them resting so sweetly, with their full red cheeks. She muttered to herself, "They will make a tasty meal for me." Then she grabbed Hansel and with her scrawny hand took him to a small shed and closed and barred the door to him. He could cry as loud as he wanted, it did him no good. And then she went over to Gretel. She shook her until she woke up and she cried, "Get up, lazy bones, fetch some water and cook your brother something good. He's staying outside in the shed waiting to be fattened up. And when he's put on enough weight, I'll eat him up." Gretel began to cry bitterly, bitter tears, but it did no good. She had to do what the wicked witch had demanded. The finest food was cooked for poor Hansel, and Gretel got nothing but crab shells. Every morning the old woman would slink over to the little shed and cried out, "Hansel, hold out your fingers so that I can tell if you're plump enough." Hansel would stick out a little bone, and the old woman, who had poor eyesight, thought that it was Hansel's finger, and she wondered why he wasn't putting on more weight. When 4 weeks had passed and Hansel was still as scrawny as ever, she lost her patience and decided not to wait any longer. "Hey there, Gretel," she called to the girl. "Go, get some water and be quick about it. I don't care whether Hansel's plump or scrawny. He's going to be slaughtered tomorrow, and then I'll cook him and eat him up." "Oh," the poor little sister wailed, and how the tears flowed down her cheeks. "Dear God, help us," she cried out. "If only the wild animals in the forest had eaten us, at least then we would have died together." "Spare me your blubbering," the old woman cried. "Nothing can help you now." Early in the morning, Gretel had to go fill the kettle with water and light the fire. "First, we'll do some baking," the old woman said. "I've already heated up the oven and kneaded the dough." She pushed poor Gretel over to the oven, from which flames were leaping. "Crawl in," said the witch, "and see if it's hot enough to slide the bread in." The witch was planning to shut the door as soon as Gretel got into the oven. Then she was going to bake her and eat her up too. But Gretel saw what was on her mind and said, "I don't know how to get in there. How can I manage it?" "Silly goose," said the old woman. "The opening is big enough, but look, even I can get in." And she scrambled over to it and stuck her head in the oven. Gretel gave her a big push that sent her sprawling. Then she shut the iron door and bolted it. "Phew!" The witch began to screech dreadfully. But Gretel ran away, and the godless witch burned miserably to death. Gretel ran straight to Hansel. She opened the little shed and cried out, "Hansel, we're saved! The old witch is dead!" Hansel hopped out as soon as the door opened, like a bird leaving its cage. How thrilled they were! They hugged and kissed and jumped up and down for joy. Your turn. Since there was nothing more to fear, they went right into the witch's house. In every corner there were chests filled with pearls and jewels. "These are even better than pebbles," said Hansel, and he put what he could into his pockets. Gretel said, "I'll take something home too," and she filled up her little apron. "Let's get going now," said Hansel. "We need to get out of this witch's forest." When they had walked a few hours, they reached a large body of water. "We can't get across," said Hansel. "There's not a bridge in sight." "There aren't any ships around," said Gretel. "But here comes a white duck. It will help us cross if I ask it," she called out. help us, little duck. Hansel and Gretel are out of luck. There's no bridge, not far or wide. Help us, guide us both a ride." The duck came paddling over. Hansel got on it and told his sister to sit down next to him. "No," said Gretel, "that would be too heavy a load for this little duck. It can take us over one at a time." That's just what the good little creature did. When they were safely on the other side and had walked for some time, the woods became more and more familiar. Finally, they could see their father's house from afar. They began running, and they raced into their father's house, throwing their arms around him. The man had not had a happy hour since the day that he had abandoned his children in the forest. And what news? His wife had died. Gretel emptied her apron and pearls and jewels, and she rolled them all over the floor. Hansel reached into his pockets and pulled out a handful of jewels, one after another. Their worries were over, and they lived together in perfect happiness. My fairy tale is done. See the mouse run? Whoever catches it can make a great big fur hat out of it. I'll add, if you wish. And that's the end of it. Isn't that fun? And it's a Halloween story with a happy ending. That witch gets her just desserts. Now, what it doesn't say here, have you noticed? That the house was made of bread, but it didn't say explicitly gingerbread. So that seems to be an added detail that came through the telling of the story over the years. Furthermore, as I noted, the opera was embellished by Engelbert Humperdinck's sister, Adele, or Adelaide. I have to go back and look. Sorry. And so she added these wonderful touches, such as the angels coming through. But also, she specified that the witch, she softened the whole cannibal aspect and had all the children baked into gingerbread before the witch would eat them, see? So she had a real sweet tooth. But that's only in the opera, and then any versions that you may have read that were based on the opera's details, which is a much nicer one, don't you think? At least to think that the witch had a sweet tooth. But I was thinking when we read quite a while ago those African American tales, and there were a number of them that outright about cannibalism. But here we have a reminder that this isn't some African peculiarity, that it was filled with the Middle Ages and the stories and folk tales there as well. Again, on the bright side, there's that sense of every parent and aunt and uncle wanting to just eat up those cute little kids. They're just so cute. And look at how all the animals in our, we're related to all the animals, we mammals. They just keep licking their babies. Maybe there's something genetic there. But nevertheless, we have that. Softened to gingerbread in the opera and other versions, which of course is my favorite. And then the other is, there were so many that the witch had changed into gingerbread that in the opera, she made a complete fence all around with gingerbread boys and girls. Now, it just so happened that when Hansel and Gretel killed the witch, the gingerbread people became alive. The children came back to life. They were restored. But they were stiff like the Tin Man. They couldn't move their gingerbread hands and arms. Well, actually, their real hands and arms, because they had been transformed. And Gretel and Hansel had to go and touch them gently, stroking their cheek. And each one cried out, "Touch me too, touch me too." It's a lovely, lovely piece in the opera. If I can recall the tune, it was like, "And touch me too." No, that's not it. Anyway, it's just so pretty. Touch me too. No, anyway, I can't think of it tonight. But they do, and each one as they sing "Touch Me Too," and the children go, and they all come fully alive. And then the father and mother, who, remember, in the opera and in some of my old stories, she is their real mother. They both come and so delighted to see the children. And there's the implication that they're either going to take all the children into their homes. Actually, there's no jewels and stuff in the opera, but I guess it's sort of implied here. Or they're going to find the homes for the children, all the missing children. So that's really lovely. The other thing that the opera does differently is their mother and father don't, though they're very poor, they don't want to bring the children to get them lost in the forest the way this story goes. In the opera, they're down to their last jug of milk, and the mother, in frustration, just sends them out into the woods, not to go too far, to pick berries, because there's nothing to eat. But just as they do that, the father comes home, and he finally had a big sale of all his wooden brooms and straw that he had been making, because there was a festival in town. And he bought all of them, and he comes home with a big basket of eggs and cream and hams and so many things. So when he tells the wife, "Let's call the children in," she says, "Well, I sent them into the woods to gather berries." And he goes, "Well, how long have they been gone?" And then she says that there's a certain name of this place. And he said, "This is where the wicked witch abides." And he tells the story how she lures children in with gingerbread. So with terror, they go fleeing for their children to look for them. And so they're much more benevolent parents. So I like that. And then I mentioned the angels. And then there's the sense, like in the book of Joseph and his brothers, that when the tragedy is over and the children are triumphantly alive, and then having released all the children who had been bewitched into gingerbread part of the fence, that it was all providential, that the angels of the spirit guided them through the forest to release those who had been in captivity and to destroy the witch. So don't you love that version? If you haven't, I'm sure you can find even the whole opera on YouTube, or selections from it at least. Maybe your school had brought in some opera singers to sing Hansel and Gretel. I did. That happened to me. I guess I was in second grade, I think. And of course, we were in a Catholic school, so we couldn't afford real music classes or things of that sort. But when the opera company came to the public school across the street to offer Hansel and Gretel, we got to go. So there we have it. Thank you so much for joining me. This was a wonderful time, a little longer than usual, and I hope you have a safe, happy Halloween. Not good to let the children go out trick-or-treating, really, unless, I suppose, of course, they'll be wearing masks. You could use Clorox wipes over all the packages when they come in. I don't know what you're choosing to do. I suggest you have a little intimate party. Bake some gingerbread pumpkins and make some treats for yourself and the kids. That's my suggestion. Do with it as you wish. And have a happy, safe Halloween and a beautiful All Saints Day. Remember, Halloween is the eve of All Saints, and that will be Sunday. So have a wonderful weekend. Thank you for joining me. As you can tell, I had so much fun, and I do, sharing these fairy tales and stories, limericks, larks, and such with you. Have a good night, everybody. God bless.